She was standing by the coffee stand, twirling a plastic cup in her hands. I didn't know then that this moment would stay with me forever. The music pounded in my ears like the dull thudding of a heart. Spotlights slashed through the night with blind beams of light. The air smelled of damp earth, heated wires, and something else, something unsettling. The crowd lived its own life, a roaring, scattering, pulling back together again. I stood at the edge of the stage, in the shadows, like a forgotten brushstroke on someone else's canvas. And if not for the thirst, for that foolish desire to get warm, I probably would have just stayed hidden in the dark. But I walked toward the coffee stand. And I saw her. She stood there like a random melody amid the cacophony. Not flashy. Not dressed up. Just alive. An old denim jacket faded at the shoulders. Dark hair, tousled by the wind. And that plastic cup she kept turning in her hands as if it held the answer to something important. I froze for a second, maybe two, maybe for a lifetime. Then I walked over. Awkwardly, almost on tiptoe, as if afraid to scare her away. I ordered a coffee. Silently, the way people do when they don't want to disturb the world. And then she looked at me. That brief glance was strange. Like a crack in glass, tiny, invisible to others, but one that changes everything forever. A smile. Awkward. Genuine. I said something about the coffee being so cold we might as well have ordered it with ice. A meaningless joke. But she laughed. And her laughter was different. The kind that hooks into you somewhere under your ribs. We exchanged a few more words. I can't even remember them, the words didn't matter. What mattered was the air between us. That strange, warm pocket of silence where anything could be born. I could have just nodded and left. Gone back into the crowd, into the noise, into my shaded loneliness. But I stayed a second longer. And so did she. Now I tap my finger against an old, almost faded photo in an album. There we are, just met, just starting a journey no one knew was about to begin. Her laughter, once so alive, now lingers between the pages. Like a breath that was never taken. The plastic cup. Sometimes the most fragile things in people's hands are the ones that change their whole lives. I never told her who I was. And she never asked. We met again a week later. Not by chance, no. This time because there was no other way. A small cafe on the outskirts of the city, hidden behind a faded sign and the scent of rain on hot asphalt. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon, burned-out candles, and old conversations still wandering between the tables. She was already waiting for me. Sitting by the window, hugging a cup like she was hiding the last scraps of warmth in it. A short skirt, a stretched-out sweater, hair gathered up carelessly. No stage. No fans. No spotlights. Just her. Simply her. I ordered a coffee even though I didn't feel hungry or thirsty. I just wanted to sit across from her. To listen to how her voice stirred the air between us. She spoke about dreams, and every word she said felt like it wasn't spoken, but breathed out, so quiet I had to lean in closer, afraid to miss a single note. I want to sing for stadiums. Not for the applause. So that one person, even just one, would hear me and know they are not alone. I want to write music that smells like rain. Like someone else's letters. Like dust on forgotten shelves. Music that isn't sold for likes. I want to live a real life. Laugh when it's funny. Cry when it hurts. And not be afraid of silence. I nodded. Sometimes I smiled. I caught every phrase of hers, tucked them into myself like rare stones, already knowing there would be no one left to pass them to. About myself, I stayed silent. I didn't tell her who I was. Didn't tell her that my name was whispered in the dirty corners of the internet. That my hands knew too much of other people's skin and too little of my own warmth. I never told her that I smiled for the cameras while inside I felt as empty as an abandoned train station. I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid that the moment I showed my cracks, everything would fall apart. That she would stand up, smile politely, and disappear into the raindrops on the window. That the ease with which she sat across from me would dissolve. That I would lose not her, no. Myself. In the old, faded photograph, her fingers are in my hair. Warm. Alive. She leaned over me, laughing softly, the way only those who truly see you can laugh. As if she had known everything from the very beginning. And still stayed. Sometimes the most important thing about a person isn't their story. Sometimes love begins where names end. I chose the truth. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't regret it. It took me a long time to find the courage. Weeks maybe, or a whole lifetime. The truth stood between us, invisible yet tangible like the cold air before a storm. I felt it every time I caught her gaze. Every time her hand brushed against mine. Every time I wanted to say I, but swallowed the word halfway through. And yet one day I spoke. Not as a joke. Not as a game. Without the safety of smiles, without hints, with no way to retreat. On a park bench where the grass was damp with morning rain, where the air smelled of wet earth and something else, something real. I stared at the ground, gathering words like shards of broken glass. The words cut my tongue, my throat, my lungs. But still, I pieced them together. I told her. About who I was. About who I had become. About the parts of myself that I had buried so deep I barely remembered where they lay. About other bodies. About days that began with pretense and ended in loneliness. About the fear that I was impossible to love. That there was nothing worth loving. No one. When I finished, the silence between us was so thick it felt like you could part it with your hands, like fog. I waited for the blow. Or for her to run. Or for a detached, I see. But she just looked at me. For a long time. Silently. And I saw something shift in her gaze. From surprise to understanding. From understanding to acceptance. No trace of judgment. Not even the faintest flicker of disgust or pity. Only her. Only her eyes. You are you, she said quietly, almost a whisper as if afraid to scare me away from myself. And at that moment I realized I had been clinging to walls I no longer needed. That maybe, just maybe, it was possible to be loved even like this. Even after I had long stopped believing it was. In the old photograph, her head rests on my shoulder. Her eyes are closed, and for the first time in a long time I allowed myself to exhale without fear. I turned the page. But inside, I still hold my breath not to disturb the silence in which, at last, it became possible to live. When she was leaving, I said, good luck. But what I really wanted to say was stay. Tours. Airplanes. Endless cities. Her voice rang more often in my head than in the phone. She would call late at night. Sometimes just at the edge of morning. Her voice crackled like an old radio with more silence in it than words. How are you? I asked, trying to sound easy, not to cling, not to pull her back. I'm fine, she answered. Quickly. Mechanically. As if she had rehearsed it 100 times. And between her words I heard airports, hotel hallways, the tired murmur of strangers' voices. And I understood she was drifting farther and farther away. Not out of anger. Not out of blame. Just farther. I kept track of her tour dates in an old notebook, its pages already faded with time. Not for control. Not out of jealousy. Just to remember. Today she's in Vienna. Tomorrow Milan. Then Madrid. As if knowing where she was would somehow make the emptiness between us smaller. As if numbers and letters could pave a road back to her. When she packed, the house would change. It became different. Tense. Waiting. As if it, too, knew that what was leaving was something more than just a person. By the door stood her suitcase, small, with a colorful sticker on the side. Almost childish. Comically small against the vast distance it was about to cross. As if it were all a joke. As if the trip would be short. As if she would come back. I stood by the door, my fist clenched in my pocket so tightly my nails dug into my palm. Good luck, I rasped out, smiling so I wouldn't give myself away. And inside I wanted to scream. Don't go. Stay. Choose me, choose this, choose us. But I said good luck. And watched her figure shrink in the doorway. In the old photograph, her suitcase stands by the door. So small. So naive in its shape. As if it couldn't possibly carry her too far away. As if she could still come back if everything was finished quickly enough. Back then, I still believed that love was about knowing the schedule. That if I waited on the right day, at the right time, she would be beside me again. But the cracks began where no one was listening. Not with shouting, but with whispers. Not with blows, but with pauses. The night she left, the house became different. The shadows on the walls grew longer. The chair across from me stayed empty for too long. The cup of coffee cooled completely, untouched by lips. And in every pre-dawn whisper I heard only one thing. She chose the road, not the home. She chose the dream, not us. And the worst part was I didn't blame her. Only myself for not finding the words that could have made her stay. Her voice broke before she even said it. Late at night. One of those nights when the darkness feels heavier than the air. When the clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each click echoing in my skull like a hammer. The phone buzzed in my hand. I knew immediately it was her. I could almost feel her breath through the cold glass of the screen before I pressed accept. And even before the words came, I heard her crying. Soft, broken. As if she were falling somewhere she could never climb back from. I brought the phone to my ear and the world shrank down to nothing but the sound of her breathing. A pause. A word that couldn't make it past her throat. Made a mistake, she finally whispered. 2 words. And not a single chance to go back. Then came the explanations, fragments of phrases, disjointed scraps of a story. There was an after-party. There was alcohol. There was a stranger's hand on her waist. There was a moment of weakness. Or escape. Or despair. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't scream. I didn't ask, who or how could you? I just sat there, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. And I could feel something collapsing inside me. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Silently. Like an old bridge that had been rotting for years, finally giving way under its own weight. In the old photograph, we're by the lake. I'm holding her by the shoulders. She's laughing, leaning back, trusting completely. Back then, I thought I could be her protection. That if she ever stumbled, I would catch her. That if the world collapsed, I would shield her with my own body. But there are things no arms and no promises can save you from. There are cracks that begin inside a person and reach you only when it's already too late. I looked at that photo and didn't recognize us. Those two who believed in forever. Those who didn't yet know that even the warmest place could turn into a point of no return. I wanted to forgive her. I truly did. But something inside me silently stood between us. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, feeling the cold slowly creep up from the wooden boards along my spine. The phone lay beside me. Its screen blinking her name. Message after message. One desperate word after another, fragments of please. Talk to me. I didn't mean to. I'll fix everything. I stared at those words as if they were written on fogged-up glass. Blurred. Powerless. And still, I wanted to forgive her. I remembered how once she had accepted me. When I had told her everything. When I had laid bare my darkest parts, pathetic, vulnerable, awkward. She hadn't flinched. Hadn't stepped away. Her eyes had stayed warm. Her hand had stayed in mine. Back then, I believed if that was possible, then anything was possible. And now, I honestly tried to find that same generosity within myself. That same faith. That same ability to stay. But something inside me stood silent like a wall after a fire, charred, blackened, but still standing. I smiled, replying to her messages. Wrote short phrases, placed smiley faces where I felt nothing. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want revenge. I just no longer felt that I could reach her. Every "I'm sorry" she sent seemed to hit the wall inside me and crumble before it ever reached my heart. I stayed physically. Still lived in the same house. Still brewed coffee in the mornings. Still knew where her keys were, her scarf, her favorite mug with the crack along the rim. But inside, I was already packing. Not clothes, memories. The very ones that once warmed me and now only burned with a freezing kind of fire. And the further I packed them away, the easier it became to breathe. And the harder it became to live. On the table lay our wedding rings. Hers a little smaller, as if made for a different, brighter, more believing version of herself. Mine darkened with time. They lay side by side, not touching. Like two islands in a cold, restless sea. The light fell through the window at an angle, harsh, slicing the table in half like a blade. There was no gold, no warmth, no promises left. Only the cold metallic glint. Only the reminder. Not everything can be mended. Not everything can be forgiven. Not everything can be reclaimed. And I realized forgiveness cannot be begged for. Cannot be earned. Cannot be asked for as a favor. It either is born on its own, or it dies along with the one who was supposed to give it. And in our case, it died. Quietly. Without a scream. Somewhere between her first "I'm sorry" and my last glance at the ring. She came back from the tour. The door slammed and nothing else. I knew the date she would return. I marked it in my notebook carefully, almost indifferently, like ticking off a stranger's appointment. I didn't go to the airport. I didn't text. I didn't call. I was already gone. Not physically, not yet. But completely and irreversibly from the inside. When she walked into the apartment, the door slammed shut. A dull, empty sound like in an abandoned theater after the final act. And nothing more. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, light, nervous. But instead of the familiar warmth, instead of the smell of coffee, instead of my voice, only silence met her. That sticky, suffocating silence that tells you right away it's too late. The keys lay on the shelf by the door. Mine. Separate from hers. A note was pinned to the fridge with a single magnet. Simple, almost lifeless. 3 words written in my handwriting, slightly trembling from the cold of the night, but steady. Don't wait for me. No explanations. No excuses. No scenes. Because words could no longer fix anything. Because sometimes silence is the most honest thing you can leave behind. In the old photograph, the couch where she used to lie. The old one. Our world. Her shawl still draped over the armrest. Light, its scent of perfume long gone. Like a forgotten hope tangled in its threads. I remember once how she dozed off on that couch, a book resting on her knees. How her hair spilled across the pillow, how sunlight fell across her closed eyes. How I thought then, this is home. Now, the couch was just furniture. the shawl just fabric, and the house just walls with nothing left inside to protect. I turned the pages as if searching for the moment when everything was still possible. Photo after photo, page after page, her eyes clear, laughing, still untouched by weariness. My hands careful as if holding something too fragile. Our smiles imperfect, uneven, real. Each frame a blow to the solar plexus. Precise but not fatal. A blow you don't fall from, you just quietly fold inward. I'm not searching for excuses. Not counting mistakes, not trying to trace where exactly we took the wrong turn. I'm just flipping through. As if somewhere between the pages I might find the moment, that last, trembling moment, where it was still possible to turn back. Maybe it was in that cafe on the edge of town, or by the lakeshore, or in that night when I first allowed myself to believe I could be loved. But no matter how many pages I turn, no matter how long I hold my breath, that moment slips away, grows farther, becomes something foreign. Sometimes love ends not because it wasn't enough, not because we betrayed each other or grew tired, because we don't know how not to hurt. We love awkwardly. We love clumsily. We love the way we learn to through the mistakes of others. And we, in turn, become someone else's unhealed wounds. I closed the album. My fingers trembled as if they themselves didn't want to let go of the last anchor. The heavy, almost living album remained on my lap. Its weight felt unbearable, as if everything we had ever been was frozen in its stitched paper and fabric. All our unsaid words. All our promises that were never meant to be kept. All the warmth that now burned with cold. I placed my hand on the cover. Quietly. The way you rest your hand on a closed door that no one will ever answer from again. I stood up, walked to the trash bin, and threw the album away. Without drama. Without a final glance. The morning was gray like an unfinished line of a poem. The sky hung low, heavy with the weight of a rain that hadn't yet begun. I sat in the empty apartment, looked at the album lying on the table, and felt everything that could have been said had already been said. Everything that could have been saved had long since died. Sometimes, in order to live on, you first have to die inside. Not beautifully. Not tragically. Without fanfare, without one last scream into the darkness. Simply to disappear. I didn't build farewell monologues. I didn't repeat to myself phrases like, I will forget her or I'll start anew. I made no promises. Because I knew promises made at such moments carry no weight. I simply stood up, picked up the album, felt the fabric of its binding slide through my palms, familiar, almost familial, and walked out. The air outside smelled of rain. Heavy, insistent, not yet fallen. I walked slowly without any real direction until I saw a trash bin at the corner. I walked up to it, opened the lid, and threw the album away. Without drama. Without a final glance. Without the cinematic gesture people use to say goodbye to the past. I simply let go of something that was no longer true. For a moment, my fingers hung in the emptiness, as if my body itself resisted the break. But my heart stayed silent. And I realized pain isn't always a scream. Sometimes pain is the quiet silence where you finally stop waiting for an answer. I kept walking, not speeding up, not looking back. Each step felt strangely lighter, as if with every meter the invisible weight on my shoulders was fading. I know what you're thinking. With a profession like mine, forgiving would seem easy. But the truth is different. She had known about all those not-so-innocent films. She had accepted me exactly as I was. I kept walking. And in that silent, steady leaving, there was more love for myself than in all the promises we had ever whispered to each other. More forgiveness. More life. More of me.